Once there was an evil wizard who used his dark magic to create a cursed mirror. If anything good or beautiful was placed before this bedeviled mirror, the reflection would appear rotten and gray. On the other hand, if something evil was placed in front of it, the mirror would show the same evil image back. The wizard wanted the whole world to know of his evil mirror. He carried it under his arm and flew up into the sky. The mirror, being rather bulky, started to shake. With a sudden gust of wind, it slipped from his grasp and shattered on the ground into countless tiny, sharp bits of glass. The wizard was delighted, knowing that if even one shard of that evil glass got into someone's eye, they would only see the bad and dark in people, no longer able to see the good. Years later, two friends, a boy named Kai and a girl named Gerda, lived next door to each other. Their bedrooms were both in the attic, and when they opened their attic windows, they were so close they could reach out and touch fingertips. The roof was sloped, with an old gutter running between the two roofs. Where the rainwater landed at the end of the gutter, their families had planted vegetables and roses. Kai and Gerda tended to it as if it were their very own garden. They came from poor families and had no toys to play with, but they played in their garden on the roof and were happy. One day, while Kai and Gerda were weeding the garden on the roof, a gust of wind suddenly blew by. A sharp bit of that evil glass flew straight into Kai's eye. He stood up, stepping on the roses. "I don't want to weed this stupid garden anymore," he said loudly. "Okay," said Gerda. "But Kai, you're stepping on the roses." Kai snapped, "What do I care if I step on the roses? Stupid roses aren't worth anything. I never want to play with you, Gerda, ever again." Gerda was stunned. She didn't know what to say. The next day, Kai took his sled into town. The sled was slow, and soon a large white sleigh sped by him on the road. As the sleigh skimmed close to Kai, it slowed down just enough for him to tie the rope of his sled to the back of it. Now he could ride his sled behind the big sleigh. He thought himself very clever, but he didn't know that the sleigh was driven by the evil Snow Queen. Dressed in her white fur coat, the Snow Queen was well aware that Kai was riding behind her. She had slowed down just to give him the chance to tie on the rope. She didn't even need to look back. She knew that Kai would soon be frozen with cold. Then, it would be easy to make him hers. The Snow Queen drove on, and when she knew that Kai must be bitter cold, she stopped the sleigh, approached the boy, and said, "Poor thing, you must be frightfully cold." Kai could only shiver in response. "I can make it so you don't feel the cold," said the Snow Queen. "I will kiss your cheek. Would you like to not feel the cold anymore?" Kai nodded, and the Snow Queen kissed his cheek. Sure enough, he no longer felt cold. "Now, one more kiss," said the Snow Queen. "With this one, you will forget all about Gerda and your family." Before Kai could say anything, the Snow Queen kissed his other cheek. She laughed and said, "If I kissed you a third time on your forehead, you would die. But I have things for you to do for me back at my palace." Then she got back into her sleigh and drove on. Kai did not return home that day or the day after. You can imagine how upset everyone was. They said poor Kai must have drowned in the river. Gerda ran down to the river and called out to the rushing waters, asking if it was true. The river would not say. Gerda took off her red shoes and held them up. She promised to throw her red shoes into the river if only the river would give back Kai. But the river would not let her throw in the shoes. And that's how Gerda knew that he must not be under the water. But where was he? Gerda searched many places looking for Kai. She even went to see a witch, who tried to trick Gerda into staying with her forever. Gerda ran out very fast, just in time. She met a crow, who told her that to find Kai, she must go to the palace of a certain princess. So Gerda set off to the princess's palace. The princess didn't know anything about Kai but gave Gerda warm clothes and a beautiful coach to continue her journey. Gerda was riding in her coach when a band of robbers leaped out from behind. Their leader, a robber girl, forced Gerda into her own coach, taking the reins and riding off. Now Gerda was a prisoner, and worse, she still had no clue where to find Kai. The robber girl took Gerda back to her home, where Gerda was made to sleep in a barn, in a corner next to a reindeer. When the robber girl left, Gerda cried out, "Oh Kai, where are you?" Two white doves perched high in the barn's loft heard her cry. One dove said to her, "We remember seeing that boy Kai you speak of." "You do?" said Gerda. "The Snow Queen drove by him in her sleigh," said the other dove. The boy Kai tied his sled to the back of her sleigh and rode behind it very fast. "We were flying to see our friends and their nest," said the first dove. When the evil Snow Queen passed by, she turned and breathed on our friends. The dove could not finish, and the other one said, "Only we survived." "How terrible!" "I am so sorry for you," said Gerda. "But you saw my dear Kai?" "Where was the sleigh headed?" "It was headed in the direction of the Snow Queen's palace in Lapland," said the first dove, "where there's snow and ice all year long." "How will I ever find this place, Lapland?" said Gerda. The reindeer, who had been tied to a post and had remained silent until now, spoke up. "I know about Lapland," he said. "I was born there." "How will I ever find this place, Lapland?" said Gerda. "Please, could you take me there?" "Yes, I could, if only you and I were free of this place. But who knows how long we must stay here?" The robber girl had been outside the barn door all this time. She wasn't really so mean after all. She entered the barn, cut the ropes binding the reindeer, helped Gerda mount him, and gave her a cushion to sit on. She even provided Gerda with a pair of fur boots, 2 loaves of bread, and a piece of bacon. "Be off now," said the robber girl. "Find your friend." Off like the wind flew Gerda and the reindeer. They rode and rode until darkness fell, needing to find a place to stay for the night. They knocked on the door of a small hut. An old woman answered and welcomed them inside. Gerda told her about their search for Kai. The old woman said, "You still have a long way to go to reach Lapland. The Snow Queen's palace is 100 miles away." "How will we know when we get there?" asked Gerda. "You can't miss it," the old woman replied. The windows of her palace burn with a blue light that can be seen for miles around. But when you arrive, don't go to the palace right away. Look for a cabin nearby with a red door. Inside that cabin lives a Lapland woman I know. The old woman picked up a piece of dried fish and wrote some words on it. "Give her this fish," she said, "and she will help you." The next day, Gerda and the reindeer rode as fast as they could, flying like the wind for 3 days. On the 3rd day, they saw blue lights from afar. As they got closer, they saw a large, dark palace. But instead of entering, they looked for the cabin with a red door. They were very cold and hungry by then, and glad when they found the cabin. They knocked on the door, and a Lapland woman ushered them inside, letting them warm themselves by the fire. Gerda told her that they had come looking for her dear friend Kai and that he was last seen with the Snow Queen. She handed the fish to the Lapland woman. The old woman read the words on the fish 3 times, then put it in the pot on the fire for soup, as she never wanted to waste anything. "Did it tell you anything at all?" cried out Gerda. The reindeer asked, "Is it some magic that will give Gerda the strength of 10 men?" "The strength of 10 men," said the Lapland woman, with a huff. "That would be of very little use." She turned to Gerda. "There is no magic anyone can do for you that you cannot do for yourself. Your friend Kai got some bad glass in his eye. That's why the Snow Queen took him. By now, she has probably kissed him twice, giving her full power over him." "Full power," cried Gerda, alarmed. "Surely something can be done." "Maybe," said the Lapland woman. She turned to the reindeer. "Go now, both of you, to the Snow Queen's garden that is just outside her palace. Eat the moss and drink from the stream. Rest. well what she must do. They did just that. On the first full moon of the month, Gerda summoned all her courage and went to the Snow Queen's palace alone. The walls of the palace were blue ice. The windows were blue ice. In every room, the windows were open, and the wind blew in with such a chill that her breath froze the moment it passed her lips. In the center of the palace, the Snow Queen sat on a dark throne, dressed in a white fur coat. On the floor before her was Kai. He sat very still. His face was white and frozen. He did not see her. Gerda ran up to him and threw her arms around him. "Kai," she cried, her tears falling upon his face. Those warm tears of love melted the ice and washed the evil splinter from Kai's eye. Gerda held him close, and at last, Kai recognized her. He cried out, "Gerda! Where have you been? Where have I been?" "We must leave at once," said Gerda. She led him by the hand, and they both quietly turned to slip out of the palace. It was cold and dark, but in the sky, they could see a star pointing the way home. Soon they met up with the reindeer, who had waited all that time. And they rode off as fast as they could. When Kai and Gerda finally returned home, they found everything just as it had been. They climbed the stairs to their 2 attics, and from their windows, they saw the roses in full bloom again on the roof. The 2 children, now grown, stepped into the garden. With joy in their hearts, they watched their roses waving in the breeze. And that is the story of the Snow Queen.